With all the latest from around the world and here at home now, it's the ITV News.
After being accused of double standards, the Prime Minister says he will self-isolate after all.
We did look briefly at the idea of us taking part in the pilot scheme.
In a swift U-turn, Boris Johnson, along with the Chancellor, will now self-isolate after being in contact with a positive COVID case.
The only reason that he's U-turned on this is because he's been busted. It's like bank robbers who got caught and now they're offering the money back.
Also ahead, the countdown to so-called Freedom Day in England, but many remain fearful as coronavirus cases continue to rise. 6 athletes from Team GB are forced to isolate just days before the Tokyo Olympics, and
this is absolutely unbelievable. Hamilton's wristed and they've made contact.
Drama at Silverstone as Hamilton clashes with Verstappen but still clinches his 8th victory at the track.
This is ITV News with Duncan Golestani.
Good evening. In a few hours' time, most of the remaining restrictions in England will be lifted, but it is those on self-isolating that the Prime Minister is accused of trying to dodge. Having been in contact with a positive coronavirus case, the Health Secretary, Downing Street announced Boris Johnson and the Chancellor would take part in a pilot scheme which would allow them to avoid self-isolating. From those families whose lives have been disrupted after being forced to quarantine, there was fury, and from opposition politicians, derision. Cue a rapid U-turn. Here's our political correspondent, Romilly Weeks.
There are worse places to have to self-isolate than the Prime Minister's country mansion. But this morning, that was very much not the plan. In an extraordinary 24 hours after the Health Secretary tested positive for COVID and both the Prime Minister and Chancellor were contact traced, they initially said they would escape self-isolation by joining a little-known pilot scheme involving daily testing. A few hours later, they had a huge change of heart.
We did look briefly at the idea of us taking part in the pilot scheme, which allows people to test daily. But I think it's far more important that everybody sticks to the same rules. And that's why I'm going to be self-isolating until the 26th of July, Monday, the 26th of July.
However, not before a minister had been sent out this morning to defend the idea.
This is a well-known and long-standing pilot that's being conducted across a range of public sector organisations, including Border Force and TfL, which runs the transport network in London. Downing Street is part of that pilot, and it enables people to continue doing essential work only, being tested daily.
While most of us are basking in the sun, over 500,000 people are currently self-isolating and stuck inside. Families like the Andres, whose children are missing the end of term and delaying their holiday, expressing the anger of many.
When I heard that this morning, I just thought, how dare they? How dare they not follow the same rules that we're all following and that they've set? And it is just that sense of it's one rule for them and something completely different from us. Just like we're just little people.
Labour say the government have been caught out.
And the only reason that he's U-turned on this is because he's been busted. It's like bank robbers who got caught and now they're offering the money back. One rule for them, another rule for everybody else. It's contemptuous of the British public.
The timing certainly could not feel worse. Just as the country embarks on the final stage of opening up, those responsible for the decision will watch behind closed doors, a potent illustration of how fast COVID is still able to spread. Romilly Weeks, ITV News.
So, as we just said, in a couple of hours, nearly all COVID restrictions will be lifted in England. The legal requirements to wear masks inside will go, as does the need to work from home if you can. But as cases continue to rise, almost 50,000 recorded again today, there are concerns the change is coming too soon. Neil Connery has the details.
After 16 months, they're gearing up to reopen this Watford nightclub as England's COVID measures change tomorrow. Dubbed Freedom Day by some, for others one filled with fears. They say they've done everything to make clubbing safe here.
We are hoping to get 2,000 people walking through these doors. Monday the 19th, it's like New Year's Eve, Halloween, Christmas Eve, all together in one go. We cannot wait.
Wetherspoon's pubs in England will resume table service and relax rules on face masks. The chain says it will keep some measures like table screens and hand sanitizer stations in place. From tomorrow, social distancing is no longer mandatory in England. Face masks are recommended in crowded spaces like public transport. There's no limit on meeting up, but people are being encouraged to do so outside where possible. The government says the success of the vaccination programme has allowed the relaxation, with all adults now having been offered a jab. At this centre, the impact of the changes was on many minds.
The number of cases would probably say that it's maybe too soon, but perhaps everyone's ready for it.
Well, I'm pregnant, so I'm very anxious about it. I feel that pregnant women have just been left to survive the next couple of months, and I think it's a very concerning decision.
I think all the restrictions lifting does kind of make me feel a little bit anxious about it, but I'm still going to be wearing my mask. Supermarkets, well, obviously on transport we have to, kind of just making, common sense decisions.
Tomorrow's move is a gamble, but one the government says is justified by the science. Neil Connery, ITV News.
And for all the rule changes in England tomorrow and the situation in the rest of the UK, there is more on our website, itv.com/news. Let's speak to Romilly now, though. Romilly, lots of anger aimed at the Prime Minister, not least by the many thousands who are going through self-isolation like him.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands, with over 800,000 pupils off school at the moment, tubes and trains being cancelled, and supermarkets warning of food shortages because of the numbers of people being contact traced. And yet only a tiny minority have access to the kind of scheme that the Chancellor and the Prime Minister briefly fast-tracked themselves onto. Tomorrow, however, we are expecting an announcement on a change in the rules for NHS staff because of the unsustainable pressure that the NHS is under because of staff shortages, allowing some staff an exemption from self-isolation. But this row really couldn't have come at a worse time for the Prime Minister as he tries to mitigate the disruption that the increased amount of pinging is doing to society, with a renewed fear in Number 10 about just how fast cases are rising. We are the third highest for daily infection numbers currently.
Romilly, thank you. Well, and ITV News has confirmed government plans not to offer the COVID vaccine to all children and teenagers. It's understood that tomorrow ministers will announce that only those aged between 12 and 15 who are considered vulnerable to COVID or who live with vulnerable adults will be offered the vaccine. In Germany, Angela Merkel has promised to get help for the many thousands of people whose homes and livelihoods have been destroyed in the devastating floods. Today, she visited one of the worst affected areas, a scene she called surreal and ghostly. Merkel talked to survivors and emergency workers in Schuld, a village in western Germany. She said her cabinet will approve an immediate financial aid programme next week. More than 180 people are known to have died in the floods. Authorities say hundreds more are unaccounted for and fear the death toll may still rise as rescue workers dig deeper into debris left by receding waters. Meanwhile, heavy rain is continuing to batter parts of southern Germany and Austria. For athletes who have already trained through the uncertainty of a delayed Olympic Games, there was yet another hurdle today, one all too predictable. 6 Team GB athletes have been forced to self-isolate after coming into contact with a positive case as they travel to Tokyo. It means disruption for the athletes just days before the Games are due to begin. Sangeeta Lau reports.
As Japan bakes in 33-degree heat, the Olympic torch is already burning. Just 5 days until the opening ceremony, but not all athletes are warming up. As Team GB touched down in Tokyo, the British Olympic Association announced that 6 athletes and 2 staff members from the athletics team, who through no fault of their own have been identified as close contacts, will be confined to their rooms. This is, they say, disappointing news for the athletes and staff, but we absolutely respect the protocols in place. All have so far tested negative, but must now self-isolate in their blocks. Since the start of the month, a total of 55 COVID cases have been recorded among athletes and officials in the Olympic Village. The International Olympics Committee says it's doing all it can to stop the spread of the virus.
There is no such thing as zero risk. The mingling and crossing of population is incredibly limited, and we can ensure that transmission between the various groups is almost impossible.
Many in Japan have protested against the Games, concerned it could increase cases in their country. Tokyo 2020, though, says it's monitoring the rates closely as it aims to host an Olympics that really will be like no other. Sangeeta Lal, ITV News.
Lewis Hamilton has secured his 8th win at Silverstone in dramatic style. He collided with rival Max Verstappen on the opening lap. It led to the race being red flagged and the home favourite being issued with a 10-second penalty. Graham Stothard was watching.
There was only one story going into today's Grand Prix, the battle between these two.
It feels like today is pivotal.
Max Verstappen on pole, home crowd hero Hamilton just behind. And it sure delivered on drama.
It's still not enough. This is absolutely unbelievable. Hamilton's rested.
Hamilton's Mercedes clipping Verstappen's Red Bull, sending him spinning across the gravel into the tyre wall.
And in Max goes.
It prompted a red flag for only the 4th time in more than 70 years of Silverstone Grand Prix history. Verstappen thankfully walking away uninjured. It was restarted around 40 minutes later, Hamilton incurring a 10-second time penalty. But in an astonishing last few laps, he clawed it back. And on the same corner Verstappen came off,
Hamilton's going to try it at the same corner.
He took the lead, holding it to the finish, claiming his 8th Silverstone Grand Prix win.
There's a long way to go, but let's keep pushing, guys. I believe in you.
Graham Stothard, ITV News.
Finally, tributes have been paid to the comedian Tom O'Connor, who has died.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tom O'Connor.
The entertainer was famous as the host of many shows in the 70s and 80s, including ITV favourites Name That Tune and Crosswits. His family say he died in hospital in Buckinghamshire. He'd had Parkinson's for over a decade. They described him as a unique comedian and a true gentleman. He was 81. And that is it for now. From all of us here on the Weekend Team, thank you for watching and good night.